Good evening, everyone. It's very late, at least for my usual standards for doing stuff like this, but I figured let's do it anyway. So, tonight I want to talk about something that's been on my mind, and that is data protection, right? So, there's a lot of devices in our life anymore, right? And frankly, there's simply too many of them to keep track of, right? People have their cell phones, and they have laptops, smartwatches, tablets, smart devices, smart thermostats, smart plugs, smart homes. Well, what's probably one of the biggest nuisances is that when you get a new device, or heaven forbid, your current device goes up and poof, getting it set up back to the way you want, right? It's probably one of the biggest and most frustrating sticking points with technology, is that the technology doesn't know how you want it to be set up. You just simply know one thing, and one thing only. And that is you want it the way you had it, right? We're creatures of habit, right? That's just simply how it works, right? If you log onto your computer and you open up a browser and you go to a website, you expect that to just work. You know, if you had a bunch of bookmarks to all the favorite places you enjoy to visit on the internet, you want that stuff to be there. But how do we tend to have stuff like that, right? Well, I want to talk a little bit about cell phones first before I get into tonight's topic a little bit here, right? So there's the two major cell phone manufacturers, right? You either end up really much anymore with an Android phone or an Apple device, right, or an iPhone. So you're either working on Apple's operating system or Android, right? And that, for the most part, is run by, and the apps come from, the site Google, right? They're big in their Play Store with all their apps and stuff, right? When you have an Android-based phone, right? Say you get a new one, right? You log in with your Google account, and then it asks you if you'd like to put your stuff that was in your Google account onto the new device, so that you can walk into a store, buy a new phone, log in with your stuff, and then what does it do? You start to see your apps reappear. You see your contacts, right? If you save them to Google, those reappear, right? So you just log into one thing and your stuff comes back to you, right? In the way of iPhone, it's a very similar setup, right? You log in with your Apple information, and then you have the ability to get your stuff from the quote-unquote cloud, and it comes back to you, right? But the thing is that we don't think about data protection when it comes to cell phones, for the most part, right? The average person doesn't think about that. They just use their device, and then if it gets run over by a milk truck, they can just replace it, log in, and they're ready to rock and roll again, right? But devices that don't have that central management, where you just log into a thing and your stuff reappears, well, that's something you're responsible for, right? Because if I talk about like the idea of like a smart thermostat, right? You log into with an account, right? And your settings are stored in your account for the most part, right? It comes back, right? Well, a good majority of the computers that float around are Windows based, right? Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 7. If you want to go super old, we can do XP, 98, Millennium, NT, Windows 3.1. I can keep going. My point is that even though Windows has a couple of things, they're really not solutions for keeping your stuff safe for the most part, by and large. There's a couple of things we could turn on. There's a few things I'm going to mention here this evening. But by and large, for those of us that do use laptop devices, we're responsible for keeping that stuff safe, right? And if you do any kind of work, right, well, probably don't want to lose it. Data loss comes in a lot of different forms. It could be that the device is physically yeeted into outer space and it gets crushed by a big truck or someone with a big hammer, or you drop it down a flight of stairs. Frankly, folks, they don't bounce. They generally tend to, go for a ride. And then your stuff's toast, right? Or it could be something a little less hilariously catastrophic, like the unfortunate event of dumping a cup of coffee on your keyboard. And then the computer goes, ah! What'd you do that for? 9 times out of 10. No, I can't say that. A good majority of the laptops that I've seen that have a sporadic blip out of existence where a cup of coffee was dumped on them, almost always they don't immediately shut themselves off. Usually they keep running. If you dump any kind of liquid on your device, hold the power button until it shuts off. If the battery comes out, remove it. And most importantly, unplug the power from the wall. Flip it upside down and let the water drain out the way it went in. If you're lucky, no serious damage will occur. But these are some of the simple ways that your device can become damaged, Or you could unfortunately have something that no one enjoys, and that's storage failure. And that in your device is where all of your stuff lives. That could be a hard disk with spinning and moving pieces, or that could be solid state memory where there's no moving pieces. Think of a flash drive, right? Some people call them jump drives. It's just a little thumbstick you stick into your computer, and then you can put stuff on it, right? There's no moving pieces to that. That's solid memory, right? Well, hard disk has spinning platters in it, right? But the thing is that they're not designed to be dropped, especially if they're running. And a good jostle, or the motor burns out, or sometimes they just die. Sometimes the logic boards don't behave anymore, and the little heads that move inside of it to seek and grab data stop working. Sometimes you can hear a clicking or a ticking. And when you hear that sound, you're in a bad space, because you ain't getting stuff off of it at that point. There's data recovery companies you could spend several of thousands of dollars to, and potentially get your stuff back. Or you could just back it up, like we're going to talk about this evening, and prevent yourself from having a headache like no other. So, one of the biggest things I hear when I talk about this kind of stuff with friends, family, coworkers, is that I hear the phrase, I don't care if I lose my stuff on my device. I hear that, and then I immediately have to ask them a couple of follow-up questions. Because when I say, or they say, they don't care if they lose their stuff, what does that really mean? What things do they not actually care about losing? If it's the bookmarks in their web browser that takes them to their favorite social media sites, yeah, they probably don't care about losing that stuff. But they probably care about losing their family photos. If they're an artist of some kind, it could be digital art, or maybe they're a DJ and have a music collection, right? Whether that's a collection that you use for work, or you make your own music. Maybe you just accumulate stuff for your own personal ventures in your own time. Well, it could be something along the lines of written code, like machine code, or renderings. Or maybe something as simple as a past purchase receipt. How many times have you purchased something online and needed to return it? Well, most of the time, the return and everything happens without requiring to provide the receipt, right? But what if you took a scan of a receipt that you went to a physical store, like a big box store? Well, if you lose the paper receipt and you put a copy of it on your computer because you took a picture of it or you scanned it, well, now you have a copy of it. And if you don't protect it, you risk losing it. In the workplace, usually one of the big ones would be like tax documents. The reality is that everybody has personal taxes they have to accomplish, right? That makes money in the States. You have to, file your taxes appropriately to do the thing. And if you ever come across an audit, older stuff like that, you may need to reproduce. And if your laptop dies, you don't have paper copies of this stuff, because most of the world is moving away from what? They're moving away from paper. That's perfectly fine, but what's the difference between a piece of paper in your cabinet and a file on your computer is that the piece of paper that's in your cabinet isn't instantly going to go poof because it sat there for too long. It could fade, it could get burned up or water damaged. But in the space of a file on your computer, if you have any kind of issue with the storage where the files live, think of it like a bookcase, right? You take all your books and you put them on the bookcase. Well, if the bookcase sporadically disappears, all the data and all the books go crashing to the ground, and that's the end of them. They're gone. So, when people say they don't care about losing their stuff, generally I like to kind of rephrase and I ask, what do you actually have, right? And sometimes I get the answer, well, I'm okay, because my stuff's in the cloud. Well, what does it mean that your stuff is in the cloud, right? So, we've got this concept, right, of the cloud. I'm gonna draw a really, really bad cloud. Yes. Yes, this lump of drawing is the cloud. You got a phone, the world's worst phone. And a PC, personal computer, right? Well, I hear stuff where people say along the lines that they have stuff on the computer. It's backed up to the cloud. Well, it may not be what you kind of anticipate, because to have files in a cloud drive, that's not really a backup. It's got some additional protection than files being local on your computer, but I wouldn't truly call it a backup. Let me explain. What is the cloud? Let's start there, right? The cloud is simply another computer somewhere on the internet. You don't have to manage it. You don't have to worry about it. You pay usually X amount of dollars a month to have your stuff put on their cloud provider, right? And then when you need your stuff, where do you go? Well, if you're using Microsoft OneDrive, you just go into your OneDrive. Where do you access that? Well, you can access it online, or you can install the application on your computer. So which then you have the files on the PC, right? Lives down here on the PC, but it also makes a copy of them into the cloud. Well, why would we not call that a backup, right? If you have the files locally on the PC, right, and you take a picture, we'll say it's a picture of an apple. Right? Or a picture of our apple, then copied to the cloud. Well, you now have one copy of the apple on your computer and a copy of it living over here in the cloud. So, say now you're at work. On your work PC, and you want a copy of that picture of the cloud that you uploaded earlier. Well, you log into the online provider, and then it'll make a copy of the little apple down to your work computer. I'm drawing hearts instead of apples, folks. But now you have your heart apple here, because I don't draw. My God. Don't ask me to draw stuff. That's terrible. Uh, it it now exists in what? 3 different places. It's on your work computer. It's up in this cloud provider, and it's also on your PC, right? Now, say that I'm on this work computer and I accidentally delete the copy of the apple from the work computer, right? It gets mashed. Applesauced. Well, as long as it was only deleted from the work PC and I didn't touch my login to the cloud provider, it still lives up here in the cloud, right? So there's a copy of it in the cloud, and there's still a copy of it on my local PC that's at home. Well, let me ask you this. If on your PC at home, you were to delete that copy of the apple, what the cloud provider does is it then deletes the copy that's up in the cloud. Well, if you didn't realize you deleted that off of your computer, the cloud provider doesn't know you didn't do that on purpose, so it deletes its copy of it. So now you don't have a copy of it in either place. The nice thing with the different cloud services is they do allow you the ability to restore stuff from the cloud recycling bin, which can allow you to get it back out before it's deleted forever. Most cloud providers will hold on to stuff for, I think, 30 days, approximately speaking. Everybody does it a little differently, but like 15 to 30 days, they hold on to stuff before it goes poof, poof. But with just one simple click, you've now successfully deleted 2 copies of this stuff, right? Well, that's not a backup. Because if I only deleted it in one place, it deletes it in the other. Well, say that I deleted the copy of the apple off of my computer today, and 2 months goes by and I realize, oh wait, I actually really needed that. Well, I can't go into the cloud provider and ask them to give it back to me because I don't have a copy of it anymore. I need to do today because you deleted it and then they deleted it. They're not going to hold on to it for you. Once you say that it's gone, right? The other thing that when it comes to cloud not really being a backup is if something nefarious happens to your stuff. So say that you had your Apple and you get a virus on your computer. And the virus messes up the file so it no longer looks like an apple. It looks like a circle now, or a 6. Well, up in the cloud provider, it's going to look like a 6. Now, unfortunately, since that change came from your computer, yet again, the cloud provider is not going to know or care. It's going to synchronize that change you didn't want up to the cloud. That doesn't do you any good, because again, it's not a backup. It's just another copy of it that could potentially be changed, right? And that is when you have those cloud software connectors installed. All the different ones do it. Dropbox, OneDrive, Google's Drive. There's a couple others too. You can install their software that makes it easier for you to upload stuff back and forth between the cloud drive and your local computer. But one of the biggest drawbacks of having that installed is that since it automatically will synchronize changes back and forth, you hamper any effort of you having an extra copy of your stuff somewhere safe. So, cloud drives are really good for having either a second copy of stuff. Like if you physically made a copy, right? So you had that apple. Wow. Right? And you made a copy of it. It's the Apple II. And then you copy that up to the cloud drive. Well, now you've got your original copy right there. And if I delete that one, well, this one's still on my computer, then it still exists up here in the cloud drive. So push comes to shove, you could still exist. But if the original copy, the original Apple, if that's the one that gets changed and it's set to automatically go up to this cloud provider to make it available everywhere, that one gets toasted too. So, cloud providers, they're good, but I would not call them a backup. Because they're not. If you make a separate copy of something and put it in your cloud drive, then yeah, that would be a backup, right? Or say I had a picture of that same apple, right? And I copied it to put a second copy on, say, a flash drive or an external hard drive. That would be considered a copy of it. You know why? Because that is completely removed, right? Nothing else can touch it. If I'm holding it in my hand, then that flash drive and that copy of the Apple is as safe as long as I keep the drive safe. That's a copy. That's the most basic of a backup of something you can have. It's just making an extra copy of it, putting it somewhere else safe. That could be in a drawer. That could be in a fireproof safe. That could just be in a bucket on your desk. Having a second copy of stuff comes in handy so you don't accidentally burn yourself, right? But naturally, even though the easiest option is just copying and pasting files back and forth to a flash drive, well, there's software you can work with that makes keeping your stuff safe a little easier, right? I talked about it on Twitter a little bit today. Veeam. Veeam is a really cool software manufacturer that makes backup solutions for a ton of different stuff. The biggest one they're known for is the backing up virtual machines. So instead of a physical computer like your laptop, picture a box. It's a virtual box. You can't hold it, you can't touch it, but it can run an operating system like your Windows, like Windows 11, right? There's no physical buttons on the thing, but it's just running on another computer somewhere that you can interact with, just like you would if you were in front of your own laptop. It's actually really neat. And Veeam makes solutions for keeping those type of computers safe, because there's no physical computer, but there's a virtual computer that's running, oddly enough, on another computer. It gets convoluted and confusing in a hurry. But one of the things that they make available for free to anybody who would like to use it is the home edition of their backup solution that's specifically for Windows-based computers. I'll show you. I'll show you on the website like how you get it, and we're also going to configure it too. Yeah, there's a lot of different ones out there, which is not too shabby. Let's see here. Okay, I briefly mentioned that Microsoft has a few built-in things for keeping your stuff safe. It doesn't really cover a whole lot, but I do want to touch on the 3 different things that they have available. They have OneDrive folder syncing, right? So we talked a little bit about a cloud provider. That's just what that is, right? And a syncing folder is a space where the changes you make on your computer then get bumped up to the internet, and then they're available that you can access them from anywhere. But again, it's not a backup, but it is a way for you to keep your stuff safe. Because in the end, if you made changes on your computer to that Apple and you added a second stem to it and saved it, it copied up to Microsoft and your laptop dies, well, now your stuff is actually safe. It's safe up in the cloud because it's another copy of it somewhere else. The app history. So, when you work with the Microsoft Store, the there we go, the music's doing funny stuff. When you download stuff from the Microsoft Store, right? The Microsoft Store, you can think an awful lot like the Google Play Store that's on an Android phone. Or you could think of it like the Apple Store on an iPhone. The Microsoft Store is Microsoft's store for apps, right? It seems kind of silly, but the point is that any app you get from the Microsoft Store comes from them. And if you install on your computer, you can have that stuff restored automatically, just like when you get a new phone. It'll reinstall them for you. Why can they do that and not other things? Well, anything from the Microsoft Store has been provided directly from them. So that when it comes time to reinstall it on your computer, they already have everything they need to reinstall it. They have all the files and everything that made it go on there in the first place. thing about a Windows-based computer is that there's a lot of programs you can download and install, but when you get that from a third party, say the Steam client, right, for playing video games on your computer, that's not provided by Microsoft. So there's no way that Microsoft could directly reinstall Steam and all your games because they don't have access to any of that stuff or your account, right? That's not any of the things they have. It's just something that you can go get, which is why Microsoft doesn't give you the ability to just restore that kind of thing on their own. And the other thing Microsoft provides, there's some others, but like the biggest one was going to be the fact that it you could turn on for it to remember some preferences. So the way I understand this, I'm not going to be totally accurate on this, but I think everything that shows up for the most part in the news settings applet is what can be restored with the settings synchronization. Because frankly, there's just too many settings on a Windows-based computer that can be set, whether that's by you through a normal control panel, or through the registry, or through group policy. There's too many places stuff can be set up, and what Microsoft deems something that can be uploaded and restored, well, that's kind of up to them what those things are. I can tell you right now, but by having a Microsoft account, one of those things that will be restored is your desktop background. Because I've set up several computers with my personal account, and lo and behold, there came my backup, my background from the previous computer. But like sleep settings and battery settings, stuff like that, they come back to you. But for the most part, Microsoft doesn't really have a mechanism for keeping the computer safe, which is why there's third parties that make tools to help with that. There we go. Sounds being a little funny. Okay. So, before we get into it, there's a couple more things I'm going to touch on here quick. The importance of physical security of your backups, right? So, say we have that flash drive, right? Gonna clear my my space here. Just a second. There we go. Okay. Say we have that that flash drive, right? Oh, good evening, King. Glad to see you stop in. Good. Glad to hear. Thought process. Come back to me, dear. Physical security. Yes, much excellence. If we took said flash drive, right? Then we had that get destroyed in some fashion, right? So it ends up getting its peanut smashed. Well, it's no longer no good, right? And if you put it in a drawer, you forget where you have it, well, congratulations. It's now the most secure data can ever be. No one can damage it or find it, including you. That doesn't help anybody. So, physical security of your data is very important. Whether that is in another cloud provider, or backing up to a physical medium, that is something that boils down to actually keeping it safe. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the physical security to an external drive. And let me see here. Okay. I'm going to switch us over to the boop top. Huzzah! Ooh, that made me lag a little bit. All right. Where did my mouse go? Come back to me, moose. All right, I want that. I don't want that. Okay, fantastic. All right, I got a mouse. I'm dangerous with a mouse. All right, here we go. So, first thing anybody would need to do before installing this would be to go get it. So let's do that. Thank you, Mozilla. So we're going to go to Veeam.com. And we're going to swing over to the download section. And then we're going to scroll down here to free/community. Okay, sorry about that. Free/community. And then from here, thank you. We're good. I don't need it. Thank you. I know what I'm doing, or at least I pretend to. There's a couple different editions here that are under the free section. And the one we're interested in is not the first one. So the Veeam Backup and Replication Community Edition. As I had mentioned before, what this company is most known for is backing up virtual computers. They have a free version of it. That's it. That's not the version we want, though. No, we don't want that version. That version is over a gig to download, and it's not going to do what we need. I wanted to make sure I showed this directly from the website, because when I mention this is the first thing people see and get confused. We're going to scroll past it now. And we're going to swing on down to the one that makes what we need, right here. The Veeam agent from Microsoft, Windows free. This one, in this download button here, will then give us the agent that we're going to use this evening. Now, you do need to be signed up and have an account. That's totally free as well. I previously downloaded it ahead of time for class, but this is where you go to get it. And you just download it right from there. So, now that we've got that sorted out, we're going to swing over on here to the downloads folder where I threw it. And then logged in as an administrator, I'm going to run it. Click it. And then it wants to make changes to the computer. That makes perfect sense because we're going to install it. So I'm going to say yes. Okay, so then there are the acceptable use policies. I would encourage you to read through them. I already have. And then we're going to choose install. And it's going to cook some stuff up for us here. And we're just going to wait patiently while it does stuff and things. So what this program is going to do, while we're waiting for it to cook up here, is it's going to make a complete copy of Windows, including all of our stuff. So in the event that the storage were to fail, in the hard drive or solid state, this one in particular has got a hard drive. If that hard drive fails, and we have a backup copy, well then not only can we go into the backup copy and grab previous versions of our stuff, we can completely restore the computer from the last time we backed it up in full. Right? So I can go, and once we're done and I run this initial backup, as of 9 o'clock tonight, that would be exactly the way the computer would be from the restore point. It wouldn't know any different, and it would just work. It's very nice having a full computer backup. That's different than backing up just files. If we backed up just files with this, then Windows wouldn't be protected in our copy, because it wouldn't be on there, but our files would. But we're not going to do that. We have more than enough space to back up the whole computer, including Windows, which is exactly what we're going to do. Okay, this is the point now where I'm going to plug in the hard drive, so give me a moment. So I plugged in the Western Digital drive. It's about to appear there in the tray. That is a 4 terabyte hard drive off the shelf. Usable as 3.64 terabytes. That drive I know for a fact is going to be big enough. And that is because if we take a look at this PC, Windows in disk C, which is what we're going to back up, is taking up 38.6 gig. It's taking up practically no space at all, which is fine. Is to put that into some form of perspective. We'll just say for round numbers that 4 terabyte will equate to the exactly 4,000 gig. Slightly less because it's 3 point and change, but just for simple math here. If I divided that by the 36 gig, I could fit a full copy of this laptop 111 times on that disk before I'd run out of space. We ain't gonna run out of space anytime soon. Honestly, we would never want to hold on to that many iterations of it. It's disgusting. My word. Okay. So now from here, we have our location, right? Location D, that's what it mounted as. Perfectly fine. We'll click next. Can we change your power plan settings to allow daily backup to wake up this computer from sleep? This is an excellent thing that the software does and asks us about this, because if the computer goes to sleep, it won't run the backup, and then what you wanted for your copy job, it simply won't happen. So yes, we will say yes to this. Okay, so it would recommend we run the media creation now, which we can do. I was going to do this a little later. Yeah, we could do this first. Why not? Okay. Now, I forgot to grab one out here. What I need to grab is a disk that we could toss this on. Now you can 100% use a flash drive. I'm gonna be honest, I would kind of recommend to do that, but I don't have a spare one of those hanging around, so I'm gonna use a good old CD that some people don't tend to use anymore, assuming that there's enough space. We'll find out here in a second. Okay, let's see if that's going to be big enough. DVD-R. Now, it should tell me if it's going to be too small. So far, so good. We'll choose create. It didn't tell me the requirements of how much space it was going to require to make the recovery disk. But the question is now, what are we talking about? Why am I making, why am I doing what I'm doing, right? Well, if the computer doesn't start because either the hard disk failed or Windows is corrupted beyond the point that it'll start, well, you need some way to get the computer in an environment that you can use your backup. Just think about it for a minute. If you installed this software to back up your computer and you can't get into your computer, how are you going to recover it? Well, without some third party to intervene, the answer is you're not. You're not going to be doing that. So what we're doing right now is we're making a disk that would allow us to access the backups that we've made and then restore them. And the cool thing is that since this disk is going to have everything we need to restore it, we're actually making what's called a bootable disk. So the disk itself has its own operating system on it that would bypass the broken Windows or the non-existent Windows if the disk failed and you put it in a new one. From then there, it can put everything back right where you had it. Super handy. So we're actually going to just wait for this to run and create the recovery media here. Shouldn't take too long. All right, cool. It's just about done.
I think all art and imagination at some point leads you to think about things that aren't true.
Keep.
And that can be a great exercise for adapting to the world. I think that it's the job of the artist to push the boundaries of what we're comfortable with and to make us see things differently than we might otherwise see them. I think that having art is a cornerstone of a free society, and that artists help us to recontextualize things, to make connections that we might not otherwise make, and they're not always successful at it, but I think part of that is artists pushing the boundaries of the art itself.
What comes next after this is done is actually setting the backup job up. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell the software what we want to protect and where it goes. Well, we already told it it's going to go on the D drive, which is that hard drive I plugged in. But we'll tell it what kind of backup job we want to do. Since Veeam is such a powerful backup agent, it's going to ask some fairly what looks like complicated questions, because honestly there's a lot of answers. There's a lot of different ways you could set this up to work. So it's going to give us a lot of options, and it's going to be probably a little on the scary side to see it first. But we'll run through what the
hyper-realism and
the different things mean.
so, in terms of evolution, I think we've evolved as a
Okay.
nation as
I had a funny feeling that might happen, but it also didn't give us the option to tell me how big it was going to be. I'm going to imagine it's probably a couple gig then. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose the option to make an ISO image file.
just to do things like harness the power of
And this is something we can burn to disk later,
and have agriculture
or
and
put onto a flash drive later.
discover penicillin and all this stuff and what you get out
So
of that
we're going
is
to make an
music.
image, we'll click
Find out it's
next,
simple, but it's part of the game.
and we're not going to put it there. We're going to put it there. Oh, I thought I renamed this. Well, we're going to erase the gobbledygook name because this is the boop top. We'll give it a minute to run through this. I know for a fact that hard drive will have more than enough space. It's a 4 terabyte hard drive. There's no way the recovery media is going to be more than a couple gig. Now think about the recovery media, that actually something that you see here in some of these sub-steps is that it's adding support for the hardware that's actually in this specific computer. So it's not to say that this recovery disk for Veeam couldn't work in another Windows-based computer, but the reality is that if the appropriate drivers aren't on that disk, there's a good chance it won't work right, which is why that every time you install the Veeam agent on a different computer, if it was like pre-made, you'd want to run another disk, another recovery media disk. If you had a bunch of computers that were the same make and model, like you say you bought the same HP, right, and they were all the HP EliteBook like G7s, right, just off the top of my head. If you had 3 of those and they were all exactly the same hardware, then realistically speaking, you only would really need to make one of these recovery media disks, and it would work on any of them because it's all the same hardware. But that's a part of what makes this recovery media unique to the machine. Yes, King. That's exactly what we're talking about here. Yes. Alright, it's on mounting. And we should be down here shortly. Enjoy your evening, King. This is the part of computer work that unfortunately requires patience. The waiting. There's an awful lot of this in IT. Information technology. Waiting. So much waiting. I know that this machine that I'm presenting is also not the fastest in the box. But unfortunately, it's a part of the game. But that's alright though. Because the reality is, even though it may not be the fastest thing in the world, once you set it up, you're good to go. Okay, so the recovery media has been made. And since, like I said, I told it to be a disk image, and put it on the D drive here. This is what would be the recovery media, right? So it is... Oh, okay, so it's just shy of a gig. 907 meg. So that wouldn't have fit on that CD. That CD was much smaller than that. So it would have fit on a DVD, a single layer or dual layer, because that's either 4 gigs or 8 gigs. Or if you want to be fancy, you can use Blu-ray. Those are 25 gig or 50 gig. But the reality is most people don't use CDs anymore. Even usually myself included. But that's okay. I have this for later. I'll deal with it then. But if you were doing this for real, I would 100% recommend plugging in a flash drive. It's at least bigger than a gig. So then that way, you can actually plug it into your computer and use it to recover your machine. But I digress. Let's continue. So in the tray, we will find the Veeam backup agent. So I'm going to right click on it and go to the control panel. Okay, so here's the first thing. This installation operates in the free mode. Would I like to install a license file? I'm going to say no, because I don't have one. That's perfectly fine. The difference between a paid version and the free version is simple. Can't have more than one backup job with the free version. So if you want to have a backup job that copies it to a flash drive, and then another backup job that copies it to a hard drive, or if you're using something a little fancier like network attached storage or a NAS, you can only have one. You can pay for a license, and I'm sure that there's some documentation on the website about how to do so. I haven't had a need to do it, which is why I don't know off the top of my head. But it is good to know that if you like this program, you can purchase that feature, unlock it, and then be able to do more with it. But on a surface level, all we're going to do this evening is set it up so it copies this computer to an external hard drive. And that's it. I'm going to keep it simple. So we are going to go up here and we're going to do a new job. Oh! Alright, hold on a moment. That computer had it installed. I need to check. Need to do some stuff here. But a moment. Okay, that's better. All right, so out of the gate, with backup button won't work. That's better. Cool, fun fact, if you uninstall this program and reinstall it, it does remember your backup job, which is handy. If I was able to do more than one job, I would have left it and just made a new one, but I can't. That's okay, I'll remake it the way I want it later. Okay, so we're gonna click the little 3-line menu, and then we're gonna click on add new job. That's gonna start the new job wizard, which will open up in a new window here momentarily. Okay, so I'm gonna call this a full PC backup. Dash boot top. And you click next. Okay, so this is where things start to get a little complicated. The default option, which is recommended, which is also what we're going to be doing, is an entire computer backup. It backups your entire computer, so that if anything happens to it, you're in a good shape. There's different options here, like volume level backup. That backup image of selected volumes. In volumes would be logical partitions on a hard drive. That is outside the scope of tonight's conversation. And then there's file level backup, which is even slower. This does individual files and folders, but by the way that Veeam's backup agent functions, like it says here, it is slower. It will be slower. It's best just to do the default option here. Something important to note, there's a checkbox here that says include external USB drives. If you have additional hard drives that are connected to your computer via USB and they're not backed up, if you want them to be to this hard drive that we're going to back up to, you would check this box to include them. We don't have any, so I'm not going to check this box. And we're going to click next. Okay, now we got some options. Our option is going to be the easiest, and that's local storage, because the hard drive is physically connected to the computer. If I swing back over to here and click on this PC, there's Windows, which is local C. There's the hard drive I connected, which is the 4TB drive, showing up as 3.63 terabyte. And there's that CD-ROM drive I popped in there earlier. And as you can see, there's 702 meg free out of the 900 we needed to make the recovery disk, which is why it was too small. Now, unfortunately, if it told me that ahead of time, that it was 900 meg, I wouldn't have bothered with the CD. But it didn't tell me, and I didn't know, so we tried. But then we found out later, and that's okay. I digress. We have local storage, right? It says right here, choose this option to back up locally to an attached hard drive, such as USB, FireWire, or eSATA external hard drive. There's a lot of different ways that you could back up to external media, or excuse me, there's a couple different form factors external media come in, like USB-C hard drive, USB-A, like I said, FireWire, or eSATA. They're all perfectly fine. Now, something it does note here, backing up to internal hard drives is not recommended. I 100% agree with this statement, that it's not recommended. So, one of the things that's tough about data security is to making sure that it doesn't, go up in a ball of fire. And if you're backing up your computer to a hard drive, even if it's the one that you only use for backups, inside of your computer, and your power supply fails. Power supplies, when they fail, can kill connected components. That could be hard drives, motherboard, graphics card. They could do a lot of damage when they fail, because not only are they providing power to everything, they're directly connected to everything. So if they fail, they could take everything connected with them. That's no good for your backup, because if your backup is connected to the failure device, it's going to kill them. And then you're going to lose your original copy and the backup that you thought was safe. It's not safe. It's now a piece of toast. It's a toaster, like me. Don't turn into a protogen. Don't become a toaster. Don't do it. No one wants that. No one needs that. Don't use an internal hard drive for your backups. For the love of all that is good in this world, don't do it. Because if you do it, you're going to regret it if it takes your hard drive. The nice thing about external media is the fact that it's outside of your computer. One of the things that it's good to do with a backup that's external, disconnect it from your computer. Because when it's offline storage, it's protected from a couple of different things. It's protected from electrical problems. It's protected from viruses because nothing can access it if it's offline and it's not connected to anything physically speaking or virtually speaking because it's off. And as long as you put it inside of something that keeps it safe, like a fireproof safe, you drop it off in a bank vault, or if you just put it in a drawer somewhere that is outside of your house, going a step further with physical security by having it in a place that's not where your computer is, then it stays safe. Just like backing up to an internal hard drive, it's also super duper important that that backup that you have for your computer isn't sitting with the computer. If you have a laptop and you back up your laptop to an external hard drive, and then you put the external hard drive in the laptop bag, and say you get on a plane and they lose the laptop, guess where your backup is? It's lost with the laptop. And now you don't have access to your stuff because both copies were lost together. That doesn't do you any good. The backup doesn't do you any good if you don't have the ability to gain access to it. And the last thing you need is for it to be directly connected and get barbecued, or for it to be lost with the original copy of your stuff, because then you just did losing your stuff with extra steps. It's sad. It's frustrating. But honestly, it's something you got to take the extra moment to think about it, because people do it all the time. That doesn't mean it's right, though. It's very important to make sure that you protect your stuff. And not keeping the original with the backup is definitely, by far, on top priority here. All right, I've sidetracked it enough here. Local storage. We have local storage. Some of the other options here are shared folder. So if you had a file server, or some of the fancier hard drives that you could buy off the shelf, like I know Western Digital does it. You could buy a hard drive that is its own little cloud thing that gives you a folder accessible on your network. Then it could actually back up to the hard drive that's on your network. Again, with the copy of the backup or the secondary copy of a file to, like, say, a flash drive. If it's easily accessible to you, it's easily accessible to things that can do harm, like a virus or a power surge. So that's something to keep in mind. So there's nothing wrong with using a shared folder and having a second copy of it also on your network. It isn't bad, but again, you got to remember that if there's no offline copy, there truly is no guarantee per se that something bad couldn't happen to it. Bad stuff still happens to offline storage, but the reality is that if it's not connected to anything, it's sitting in a drawer, well, there's a lot less bad that can happen to it just sitting in a box. Okay, two other options here are the Veeam backup repository. That is if you're using a Veeam storage location. I have not used that, so I'm not necessarily sure. I couldn't expand on that further because I don't know more about it. And also, there is a Microsoft OneDrive option there. Choose this option to back up to the Microsoft OneDrive or Microsoft OneDrive for Business. Now, as I had said, that OneDrive specifically isn't really much of a way for backups. The way that we would be using it if we chose that option here would make it a backup, because you're making a backup file, and it's going to look like the extension is going to, I'll show it to you, it'll be a TIB, is an actual backup copy of your stuff, right? And the only thing that's going to modify that backup file legitimately would be the backup software, right? You're not going to directly interact with those files because it truly is a copy of all your stuff. So it is a backup. It's just a backup stored on a cloud device. It's very similar to a shared folder on your network. OneDrive at that point, it's just like that, except it's outside of the house. So that since it's in a cloud provider like OneDrive, the whole issue of the physical aspect is less of a worry. There's no true guarantee that any of the cloud providers couldn't lose your stuff, because they are susceptible to hard drive failure just like anybody else. But they have a lot more very expensive mechanisms that they have, like duplicate RAID arrays and other super fancy stuff that protects your stuff from the physical failure of equipment. That's called redundancy, and honestly, in a data center, there's a lot of it, which is where your stuff would end up. on another computer in the middle of nowhere. But okay. So we're going to do local storage, right? Ah! I didn't mean to click twice. Okay, we're going to do the D drive. It's going to make its own folder called Veeam Backup. That's totally fine. I'm fine with that. Okay, so we're going to go into the advanced menu here because there's a couple more things we're going to do. It says keep backups for 14 days, excluding days without backups. So that would be a total of 14 backup files. We're going to go into the advanced menu on this because we're going to take a look at a couple of things here. Alright. I'm going to click through these here and see what I'm looking for here. Okay, so the nice thing about this software is that it gives you the little hints. You can hover over and it'll show them to you. So what is an active full backup? Performing an active full backup starts the new independent backup chain. The entire previous backup chain will only be removed after the last incremental restore point falls out of retention scope, which results in additional disk space being required. Okay, let's talk about what that means in English, right? Because that's fairly technical lingo going on there, right? So if we have 14 days of backup, right? Let me switch back to my other screen here. We're gonna use Excel here to help us understand this a little bit better. So we have day 1. No, I didn't mean to click shift. Let's try that again. Day 1, day 2, right to 14, right? Well, let me not put that behind my head. There we go. Okay, so as it stands right now, before I do anything else, there's 14 days of backup, right? So that would mean on day 1, it'll do a full backup. And that is exactly what it sounds like. It is a complete backup of your computer and all of the stuff that's on it, right? Now, on days 2 through 14, it's not going to be another full backup. It's going to be what's called an incremental backup. Now, what is an incremental backup? An incremental backup is when the software takes a look at the last backup that was completed and then only backs up the changes that have been made. So on day 2, it'll look at day 1, the full backup, and the only things that changed will get put into the incremental backup. So if I have a picture, right, and it's of that apple again, right? And I take the apple and I make it a green apple when I backed it up, and then I turn it into a red apple when I do the incremental, right? And then I have 2 pictures of some palm trees, right? Well, the pictures of the palm trees in the full backup with the apple get backed up. In the incremental backup, the only thing that's going to get backed up is the apple that I changed. So it's going to change the fact that the color changed on that apple, but the palm trees didn't change. So it's not going to put them into the incremental backup because it already has the latest copy of them in the full. All of these other backups are going to be incremental. But here's the difference. When, say, day 14 backup runs, well, its incremental is going to be based on all the other incremental before it. So it's going to look actually at all the incrementals and the full to determine what it's going to back up. Which means if something happens to any of the incrementals in between the previous, well, then that backup chain doesn't function correctly anymore if those accidentally get deleted in between. So then if you have 1 full and 13 incremental, and you lose, say, day 10, well then backups 11 through 14 won't be used. You won't be able to use them. But from day 9 backwards, it still functions. If you lose any incrementals in between, then that anything in front of that gets hampered. So with that, inside of our backup software, we were talking about the active full backup, right? Well, the active full backup that we have here says that it'll create a full backup periodically based on the time that we select, right? So if we were to turn this on, we can specify which days or specific time of the year, right? So we could choose monthly, on the first, second, third, fourth, last, this day, where you would specify which months. Like, you can get really granular with this. I don't want to make this overly complicated, so we're going to make this fairly easy. We're going to say that a full active backup is done on the default every Saturday. Now, there's a couple other things we want to look at here to prevent some problems. This has the ability to check the health of the backups to make sure they're good. As I mentioned previously, if you lose an incremental somewhere in that chain of command, well, if there's corruption, then the program will likely deal with it. It may tell you that those backups, in the example, were 11 through 14 no longer work anymore, and just mark them that they don't work, or it might actually delete them. But the fact that it checks the health of the backups, what it does after it finds that there's a problem, well, then that's what the documentation's for. I'm not exactly sure what it does, but I do know that at least at a minimum it would notify you there's a problem, and then you'd be able to choose what remediation option you would have from there, whether that would be to delete them or just mark them as not usable. I'm getting kind of off topic here. The full backup file maintenance is just to compress jobs to take up less disk space. I'm not going to bother turning that on because for what we're doing, it's really not needed. And then we've got the basics here. Now, something that I'm going to tell you to turn on, but I'm not actually going to turn on for my example, because honestly, I don't need it, is encryption. If you turn on encryption, you will be required to put in a password to decrypt your stuff. And you can put a hint in if you want. Why would it help to have a password on this? Well, I recommend you don't lose the password because you can't get to your stuff without it. But the reality is that if you back up everything you have, artwork, tax documents, sensitive stuff, frankly, a lot of people, their lives live on their laptops and desktop computers. You don't want anybody just being able to use that backup. And if you accidentally lose the backup and you still have your original, well, you're okay. And the fact that it's password protected means that if someone gets their hands on it, unless they can do something bad to try to get into it, which, by the way, these are encrypted for the most part, that's not going to be really much of a problem. The average person isn't going to be able to access your stuff. It does not hurt to throw on the password. Yeah, I'm going to click next. And then it wants to know when to do the backups. Well, if you're willing to connect the hard drive at a specific time and day, then by all means turn on the scheduler. If you're using a laptop, then I don't necessarily say I'd recommend using the scheduler. I would say make a reminder on your phone to connect the hard drive, open the program, and click backup. Because then that way, you're not trying to fight the schedule. The hard drive won't miss the backup window because there's no hard drive connected. And the reality is we all have our own lives we attend to. Not everybody can, take the time to, on a very hard schedule, connect a hard drive to a laptop that could be in a bag somewhere. If this is a desktop computer, this is a bit of a less of a concern because most people don't turn off their desktop computers. And if they do, you just turn it on, plug in the hard drive, And then when the backup job is set to run, it will run it. Because when it's on a schedule, it will run automatically. Say you have the hard drive and you connect it to your computer at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the schedule's set to run at 9. Well, then an hour later, it's going to run it, and then it's going to be done. And then you can just disconnect it from the computer, and your stuff is safe. But if it's a laptop, then you will have to dictate how you want to handle that. In our case, I'm not going to turn on the scheduler. We're going to do it manually. And then there's a section here about what happens when the backup is done. Or excuse me, when to run. You could run based on actually events. So if you lock the computer, log off, or when the backup target is connected, when you attach the hard drive, that could trigger it to run the backup. Which is fine. And these are options you can use. With a laptop, that's actually not a bad option to when you connect the hard drive to the laptop. This would be a good one to turn on. Now, granted, every time you connect the hard drive, it would run that backup job. So I would 100% recommend that if you're using that as your backup drive, you don't use it for anything else. Because as you see, you can actually tell it to not back up more often than X amount of hours here. Because it's just going to keep backing up, which would be a little excessive. Okay, I'm purposely not going to check that box and click finish. Okay, so right now, so you just booted your laptop, right? Well, in the tray, it tells you right here that the job's not scheduled to run automatically. But if I want to run it, I can right-click, go to backup, and tell it to just do it right now, or I can go into the control panel. We're going to back up the boot top. The hard drive's already connected, and it's going to start. Now, while that's cooking, I'm going to swing back over to the hard drive. The folder it said it was going to make is here. It's called the Veeam backup folder. And inside of it, it made the boop backup folder. And then it made a configuration file. Now, this is a file that ends in... I did not click on the file. Let's try that again. I wanted to see the file extension. Is it going to show me the file extension? I might have to turn those on. Windows 11's a little funny, by the way, it shows stuff. Oh, there we go. So the actual backup file itself is a VBK. Not a TIB. TIB is what Acronis uses. This is why we show and tell, because honestly it's easy to get that kind of stuff mixed up. And now the backup is running. Now if I close this window, it's going to continue to run. And regardless, it's actually going to show this little animation in the tray of the little Veeam logo, and it kind of bouncing off into the ether here. Just to let you know that it's running. I'm pretty sure actually if you hover over it, it will tell you, yeah, processing 3% done. So you can keep an eye on it if you're waiting for it to finish doing its thing. But once that's finished, then it's all done. It's protected on an external medium, right? And in the case of this particular computer, there's not a whole lot on this particular computer. But there's one thing that I would like to be protected in the meantime. And that's a picture that I have on here that I got from the lovely creator Kibbles. This was a gift art, and I absolutely love it. Why does it have to be so hard to eat cookies? As a protogen. Yes, I love it. He did a really good job on this. 10 for 10. Kibbles did good. I like it a lot. He's a very good creator. I would recommend to go check out his stuff. Because he makes some nice stuff. He's a cool bean. He hangs out and he plays all sorts of games on Twitch. As a matter of fact, let me grab his handle here. I want to make sure I get it correct. I'm telling you, man. There we go. Let's see here. There we go. Yes. All right, good. I somehow know how to use the shout out commands. I'm so bad at that. But yeah, by all means, I say give them a follow. Go check them out. Kibbles does some fun stuff. He's a good bean to go hang out with. Yeah, this was a gift I got from him. A good time. But it's gonna be backed up. It's gonna be safe. You know why? Because we're taking the time to make it safe. When it comes to personal stuff, it's really easy to not give it much of a second thought on the on actually keeping your stuff safe. Because the reality is, what are we doing here? This is work, right? I've taken over an hour of your time just to explain why the madness is what it is, and for us to wander through the install of this little program. But the reality is the setup of the program isn't terribly difficult. It doesn't cost you anything to download the software. Really, the only place you're spending money is to buy a place to store your stuff, whether that's a hard drive or a NAS, or if you pay for OneDrive storage. It's really up to you where you put your stuff. But it's work that's really worth it, because if you do any kind of stuff online, I mean, it's really important not to lose your things. Because the reality is that as much as people claim that they don't really care if they lose the stuff on their devices, more often than not, people tend to forget what lives on their computers. And it's really easy to just think, oh, it's not that big of a deal if I lose my things. And honestly, for some people, that really is the case. Some people really just don't have stuff on laptop computers anymore, or desktop computers for that matter. A lot of people just function off of their phones. And for a lot of people, that's enough. And that's perfectly fine. But there's so many people that have their own personal computers that don't have anything to back them up. I do know a fair amount of people that do use the Mac operating system and MacBooks to be creative and make things. There are backup solutions for those, I am aware of. I don't know if they them off the top of my head naturally, because I don't use it. But there are options for that stuff as well. Without taking that time to make sure that you set yourself up for some kind of success, then you're not doing yourself any favors. I mean, if you really think about it, if you're not going to take the time to make sure that you don't lose your things, no one else is going to do it. Unless you've got a very friendly individual that does IT for a living that helps you with these things, then, yeah, no. Alright, we're going to let this reach the end here. We're going to let it cruise. This won't take very long because there's really very little on this machine. But before we conclude, something I do want to show you is how to restore something with this program. It's very straightforward, but I do want to point it out anyway. Because assuming that Windows isn't toast, so we want to, restore a file, then we can hop into the backup and grab it. So we're going to let this run for a few moments, and then we're going to do that. Now, granted, I didn't mention it before, but this is just a program that I'm familiar with, and I know doesn't cost anybody anything. This is by no means sponsored in any way. There are other programs out there that you most certainly could look into and use. Another popular one is Acronis, but they've shifted to a subscription base. We're using their stuff. So you're required to pay money yearly to use their things. This one you just download it and you can use it. So that's why this is the one I picked out of my hat. It's easy to get access to, and if you do want the paid features and additional stuff for more than one backup, like I said, that's really it. It's the only difference between the two as far as I'm aware. And for most people, one backup job is enough. So why not? Okay. So now our backup is done. And something I do want to showcase, which I find kind of awesome. Alright, we got the C drive. And then we have the size of the backup job. So, the whole computer right now uses 40 gig. And the complete backup of the computer is 18.1 gig. It's like half the size. The compression is kind of awesome. By far, it's amazing. I don't really get it, but it's really cool. Oh god. Okay. So, I now want to show you how to restore stuff. So, we're going to go to the backup job, and we're going to restore our files. So, if we had more than one backup in our list here, we would see them all the different restore points. Something you do have to keep in mind is that the less backups you do, the less restore points you have. That seems kind of intuitive, but let me explain. Say that today, I wanted to pull up the, can I please view the calendar on here? No? Are you not going to give me... That's better. Thank you. Okay. So, we ran a backup today, right? Today's the 9th, right? If we don't run a backup again until the 16th, right? Then anything that happens between the 10th to the 15th, we don't have a copy of. So, say that we made a PowerPoint presentation on the 11th, right? And we have to show the folks in the office the presentation. Well, if the laptop goes poof between the 9th and the 16th, well then you don't have a copy of that presentation that you made on the 11th. Because time happened between the 9th and the 16th, and the only two restore points you'd have is the copy you had on the 9th and the copy you had on the 16th. But if, say, we did a backup every night from the 9th to the 16th, right, then I have a backup on the 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. So if I did that PowerPoint presentation on the 11th, and then on the 15th I accidentally deleted it, well then I could go and I could restore it back on the 14th, 13th, 12th, all the way to the 11th, because I have a backup every single night. Now, not everybody needs a backup every single night if there's not a lot that you do, right? If you don't make a lot of new files every single day, then maybe a daily backup that happens every night isn't really your style. But it never hurts to have extra copies of your stuff if you have the space for it. In the case of our example here, we just run it when we want to, but maybe we do want to run it every night, which is when the scheduler would come in handy. But in our case here, here's our desktop computer, which is our laptop. It's the boot top. We're going to click next. We'll click open. At this point, if I put a password on this backup, it would now prompt for the password. This is as far as you'd be able to get. Since we did not password protect it, it's just going to open it. Okay. I need to do something here real quick. Okay. There are a few things I did not want to show that were included in that backup, but what I did do is I did go into my my user, and here is the Kibbles picture that I have that is in the backup. Pretty much all you would do is just browse to the folder where your stuff previously lived, and then you can restore it. In this case, this was in the pictures folder. It still is in the pictures folder. Right there. All I have to do is right click on it. I can restore it, and I'm going to tell it to keep. If I told it to overwrite, what would have happened is it would have erased the copy that's there, and it would smush it. Now, there's two of them in here now. One that says restored in big letters and a dash and then the name of the file. And then the original one that's just called Kibbles. Well, this is restored dash Kibbles. This is the one that it pulled out of the backup for us. And just like that, I can close the browser. And that's it. The backup's, you're done restoring at that point. Fairly straightforward. It's nice. What she is. Okay. That is pretty much that. Let me take a quick look here at my notes here. Yeah, I covered that. I just covered that in a different way. Okay, so I did cover that. Okay. That's everything I wanted to cover on tonight's itinerary. I'm going to open up the floor to any questions, if there are any floating around. Okay. Well, with that, thank you all for coming. It's been quite the evening. Thankfully, we didn't run into too many technical problems. And with that, I wish you all an excellent evening. Bye-bye.